All right, so we are recording, you guys. This is Jen Simmons. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background, her education, all that stuff, and yeah, go for it, Jen.
All right, cool. Hi, I'm Jen again. I am a certified mental performance consultant. I work with athletes and performers on really reaching their optimal performance and just kind of overall enjoyment of their performance domain by working on mental skills. I got my master's degree in sport and performance psychology from the University of Denver, which really takes more of like an applied approach throughout the program. So it's a little less research based. There is obviously some research involved, but we really got to take all the skills we were learning and go out in the field with local Denver schools and programs to apply some of the knowledge that we had. After I graduated, I moved back to San Francisco, and I'm currently working with a wellness group located in the Marina, doing both mental performance consulting on those some of those mental skills I was talking about, and then also I do some health coaching around disordered eating.
Awesome. Yeah. So for those of you guys following along or listening in or watching, the reason why I wanted to get Jen on here was, well, first of all, we're recording this April 8th, 2020. So we're right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And so we are all, as athletes, kind of probably in a bit of a confused state. When I'm checking in with my clients, there's a bit of loss of motivation because race schedule or race season has kind of been postponed or canceled for a lot of people, being stuck in your home. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity to get Jen on here and kind of help give us maybe some information or tools that we could utilize as athletes, either to help kind of stay motivated, understand why we're feeling the things we're feeling, things like that. So kind of on that note, Jen, with kind of some of the things I'm noticing from my athletes is like, again, confusion, maybe some anxiousness, stress from the overall situation, being at home, trying to train still. Do they want to continue training? Also taking care of their kids full time, teaching them like schooling, all that stuff. What are your thoughts on kind of that that whole world right now?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is like totally valid and it's so normal. We're going through this huge transitional time right now, and it's something like none of us have ever really been through before. Like we've never had this widespread pandemic that we're experiencing, and like there's a sense of the loss of safety, I guess, day in and day out. So it's totally normal to experience this like heightened stress, loss of motivation, kind of uncertainty, loss of purpose, maybe a little bit somewhere in there too.
Yeah.
So there are actually like a handful of things that I think could be good to touch on.
Yeah.
One of the things, like first and foremost, that I think is going to be a base of a lot of the things and tools you can implement throughout what we talk about today is reconnecting to that present moment and reconnecting to your breath through a lot of like mindfulness based work. I think that can be seen as kind of like a buzzword right now that's thrown around, but there is some solid evidence that's been put into practice on helping that just kind of reground you, helping you see your stress, understand your stress and how that sits with you rather than letting it kind of fully take over and that running your day.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think it would be good to talk about just at first is like noticing your breath. That's a really good tool to anchor to the present moment.
Yeah.
I mean, if I told you to take a deep breath right now, a lot of people would go like take in that super quick inhale. It shifts straight into your chest, and it kind of, I don't know if you notice, like your shoulders rise, your chest kind of beats a little bit faster, heart beats a little bit faster. But a different way to take in that deep breath is like a slow, smooth inhale through your nose. Really take it in right in between your rib cage, right in that diaphragm area. So it'd kind of be like and then as you exhale, you want to exhale through your mouth as if you're blowing through a straw, and just kind of notice the sensation that you feel as your rib cage just kind of falls back in, sending the air back out through your mouth. And just being able to focus not all your thoughts necessarily, so it's like nearly impossible, but just really focusing on your breath and the way it feels and the sensations that are coming up. It's actually way harder than it sounds. Like before you know it, you're like 2 weeks down the road in a story in your head of like something you've created.
Right.
But just noticing that and shifting your attention back to your breath is going to be a really helpful tool at just kind of grounding into that present moment that we keep getting so lost from.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, going to be a big foundation, and just kind of creating awareness of where we are as we go through some of the other things that are going to be really helpful
Totally.
throughout this extended period of time.
Yeah. So I feel like, I mean, when you're just talking about saying, take a breath, like my mind like wants to go and take a breath. So hopefully all the like viewers and listeners also went along and took a breath with us. Do you suggest a certain like count, inhale and exhale for something like that? Or what's kind of the protocol?
Yeah, so for something like that, it gets to be pretty individual. So the amount of time that you want to inhale, you'll kind of start to feel it. Like you'll hit this inhale point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to exhale, and like you might start to feel your heart rate pick up a little bit. So the second you kind of start to feel like you have that full breath in, you feel your lungs expand, you get that like deep diaphragm breath.
Right.
That's kind of when you want to hit that point. So typically it's either like a 4 to 6 count inhale, quick pause at the top, doesn't have to be for long, maybe like less than a second or so. And then that slow, smooth exhale, maybe closer to about that like 6 count area. And then again, if you're hitting that end point, you're like want to take that in breath again, that's when you know to exhale like maybe a little bit slower, a little bit smoother, shorten that exhale a little bit as well, and you'll get that recovery parasympathetic response rather than like activating the nervous system. Another thing I wanted to add is, and we can do this again just like as an example to get some interaction.
Totally.
But like if you squeeze your fist really, really tight, like just consciously think about squeezing it, hold it, get it as tight as you can, and then release. Did you notice what happened to your breath?
Maybe it relaxed a little bit.
So yes, that's a fantastic response that you had. So a lot of the time when you hold your fist really tight, we're holding tension in our body, our breath, we just hold it like nothing really happened. So so squeeze your fist again, but this time focus on those slow, smooth inhales through your nose and out through your mouth. The tension in your fist is a lot less. It's like there's a lot more looseness, like even though you're punching. So I mean, it's kind of like the whole body. Like the second we kind of lose connection with our breath, especially during a stressful time, like our shoulders kind of raise, we get a little more tension. So focusing on that breath allows you to just like release everything a little bit more.
I like that. And so like with the situation at hand right now, are you suggesting that people like set a time a day to do these breathing techniques, or just whenever they can remember, or whenever they're in a stress state, or more is more better?
Yeah. So in terms of like using mindfulness, it takes practice. Like it's not something that just happens at the snap of the finger. I mean, the basis of mindfulness is non-judgmental present moment awareness. So that includes the emotions you're feeling, the thoughts that are coming up, the mood that you're in, the state that you're in, and just being okay with that, I guess, without that judgmental thought. So a lot of the times when those thoughts do come up, like that's okay. It's totally fine if they're there. It's just kind of about like seeing them, and then if you can visualize like the flick of a feather, just kind of like settling them aside, coming back to your breath. It's really nice to set out a certain time of day to intentionally, purposefully practice that. I know one of the things we talked about was an app called Headspace. I love it. It is my favorite mindfulness meditation app there is. They're offering a ton of free courses right now if you download it.
Cool.
So they have options between 5, 10, 15, 20-minute meditations. So those are awesome to use. And then at the same time, it's one of those things you want to incorporate throughout your day. So it's not just one of those things which is like helpful to start and sit down for those 10 minutes and be intentional about it. but then noticing how you were feeling before, noticing how you were feeling after, like what you noticed about your breath, what you noticed about the feelings that were in your chest or throughout your body, or the emotions that were coming up. Continuously reflecting on that throughout the day, and what some of those triggers might be that are causing that stress to really ramp up.
Yeah.
Is going to be helpful. So like, yes, setting that 10 minutes out or however long you want to meditate, and then also continuously coming back to that throughout the day is going to be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
And that's like a big jump from if you've never practiced meditation to going into it. So also in everything we talk about, just giving yourself like some compassion and space, and as we go through all this.
Yeah. I mean, my personal experience with Headspace and meditation, just kind of speaking to from maybe a lot of my athletes that I work with, are very type A, and a lot of them are always wanting to go, go, go. And they like thrive in a fight or flight response, like, you know, and in the sense of terms of training and all that stuff, for the most part. And so I think, you know, with what I noticed personally with myself with Headspace is I absolutely had to start with like the 5-minute meditations, because my mind's going and I want to think about this and all that stuff. And then I was able to expand into kind of a little bit of the longer sessions, but also I was able to, when you start kind of repetitively doing Headspace, you start to get the ideas and the concepts, and then you're able to, like, when I'm rolling around in the bed in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep, I can, instead of having to like turn on my phone and put in my earbuds or anything, I can kind of remember the concepts, whether it's, you know, focusing and thinking about, you know, each section of your body from the toes to the tip of your head, and like breathing through that, like tools like that he gives in those meditations are super helpful, that you can just kind of fall back to without having to even maybe rely on the app all the time. But yeah, great app. Like I love that. And I believe he just expanded too with a, like training meditation or something like that. I thought I saw in there recently. So I haven't played around with it myself, but I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, he's got a ton of different types of exercises on there too, like targeting different things, whether that's like stress or sleep, or he has ones on like the performance mindset as well. Yes. So there is like a whole group of things that you can choose and kind of go with, and
totally.
See what works for you. Yeah.
Very cool. And so let's see, any other kind of, I know you had a list before we chatted. So what would be kind of the next tip if someone's maybe not into the meditation situation? Is there anything else that they can do?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that you mentioned, actually, I wanted to touch on like the feeling we're always doing and then doing more. And it's like, we're almost forced to take a step back from that right now, which can be incredibly challenging. So one thing that we can do during this time that can be super helpful in just kind of getting some space from the doing, and then B, reconnecting to like our purpose and our motivation, is focusing on like the being part and like who we want to be and how we want to take that into our performances as like a triathlete, or just who we are as athletes, who we are as people, teammates, family members. So a really great tool to do that is reconnecting to what your why is and to what your values are. So your values kind of guide you as more of like a compass in a sense than they are something to like be achieved like a goal would be. As you think about your values, and it's rare that we actually like sit down and take the time to figure out what they are. I remember going through this exercise in my grad program, and once I was done, I had realized I'd never really like pinpointed exactly what that meant to me, exactly how I wanted to live those out day in and day out. And we had to like stand up and give a presentation on it at the end. And I was like, wow, that just like totally shifted so much of like my thought processes and the way I go about doing like work, the way I go about consulting, like kind of whatever it was, it really gave me a lot of clarity. So being able to kind of sit down and really like start by reflecting on, I mean, there's a couple questions that can be posed to help navigate what the values are that you have. Like, what values do you hold in yourself? Like, what beliefs do you have? What are some of your favorite phrases? What are some of your favorite songs? And like, what's the meaning behind those? And then what you want to be able to do eventually, and I can actually send a really good resource of a list of values that a lot of people tend to have. It's like there's 50 of them. It gives you a short explanation on what those might look like.
Yeah.
And then a couple options for if you want to create your own.
Cool.
But sitting down, creating a list of either like 4 or 5 statements that are clear, concise, easily roll off the tongue. And a really important fact of this is having them be in your own words.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out like exactly what they mean to you and how you want to portray those values, how you want to live by those values. Like what would that actually look like in action?
Yeah.
So getting a nice clarity on those and then continuously reflecting on those and how you want to put those into action. And right now it might look a little bit differently, just considering all the like the circumstances that we're in.
Yeah.
And like that's okay. It's okay if they're a little bit flexible right now, and it's okay if there are some values that are causing more like distress than they would be otherwise. And in that case, maybe kind of reflect on them and see how you can adjust them to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I'm going to use a friend of mine. Her values
Perfect.
are be kind, work hard, and give thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So just super clear, super concise. Yeah. She has a lot of clarity on how she enacts on those every single day.
Awesome.
And being kind to others, giving compassion to others, working hard. And she loves to put like her full effort of what she has in her tank into the project that she's doing and being present where she is and giving thanks and having gratitude to people and expressing like thanks to the people that she works with, the projects that she has. So just like getting a lot of clarity around that and putting that into action just gives us a sense of direction and purpose. And it takes a lot of like the incongruence and distress that we're experiencing just kind of as we go through these transitional times and decisions that we're making of how we spend our days and what we put our focus on.
Yeah. So someone's why would be a little bit deeper than I want to podium at Ironman or something like that. That like it would be a little bit deeper than that kind of concept. Maybe it's going for like being healthy so they can be with their family longer, or is that an example, or would it be even deeper than that?
Yeah, so getting podium is more of like an achievement. That's more of like a goal. And that's a little outside of our control as well. So there's a lot of like external variables that might get in the way of being able to achieve that particular goal. But yeah, so remaining healthy and being with your family. So like getting a little bit deeper, that's like a really good one to start with. So get a little bit deeper of like, okay, well, what does healthy actually mean to me? Is that within my control? Is that serving me and who I want to be and how I want to show up every day right now? So finding a little like fine tunement within that and adjusting within that. And then family is a value. So like, what about the family system? Like, what do you love about that family system? Like the why behind that family system, which is also like a huge thing. People really value families. Yeah. So like, that's definitely a solid place to start. And then even breaking it down like a little bit further to get more clarity around what that really means.
Yeah. I think that I could see that being very challenging for a lot of people to get deep on that level and figure out what is your true why? Because like you're saying, it's totally, it's initially a goal. And I couldn't agree more that there are so many variables that affect that goal. I've talked to so many athletes who, have raced and a bee stung them and their chain broke and, things like that are obviously completely out of their control during a racing situation. So I think that's a really great tool to kind of have people dive in a little bit deeper on like why they do train and why they do put these races on the calendar and what that means for them. I think that is a great tool because I think that's a big piece of what is getting lost and why people are feeling so confused right now is they thought that their why, I think, was these races. That's why they were training because they had a race on the calendar and now there's not a race on the calendar. So why are they training? And they're trying to kind of figure that out. So I think that's a really good tool. And those examples that we'll share that you'll provide, I think will be really helpful for people. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. Your thoughts on that or should we move to another tool you have?
Yeah, I think one more thing that I want to clarify a little bit more on that is that it's very like internally based. So kind of like you said, like just having the why of training being like that race that's there, that's
Mm-hmm.
been like an external variable, and that's also like that's out of our control, which is I think a good place to step into on the next topic that we cover, is
Oh,
focusing on like the controllables versus the uncontrollables.
yes.
Right now, it feels like there's so much that's out of our control, and focusing on that can be really stressful, and it's scary, and like there's so much uncertainty right now.
Yeah.
But in particular, I mean, I'll talk about it in a sense of like training, of if you choose to train during this time, that is, if that's something that you think is going to be helpful for you and
Mm-hmm.
productive to just like your overall well-being. So things that are like obviously uncontrollable is when the next time you're going to get access to a pool if you don't have one, or
Right.
the weights that you have to train with if you want heavier, lighter, whatever it is, or the access to trails is pretty limited right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of that's kind of without out of our control, and
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of grasp onto that kind of stuff. So being able to focus on what is within your control is going to be really helpful in finding like purpose and kind of what you're doing day to day.
Yeah.
So an example could be the type of training you're working on. So maybe you want to work on flexibility, or just like a different style of strengthening, or strengthening your upper
Yeah.
body more, and being able to structure a training regimen a little bit more around that. Or um, you have control over like the purpose of the workout you're going into. So if you want to go do a tempo run, or if you want to go on a run and just be with your breath, for example, and having that be the purpose of what you're doing,
Yeah.
that's also something that's within your control. The music you decide to listen to, the podcast you decide to listen to, kind of like things like
Yeah.
that are going to be really, it's going to be a super helpful mantra just kind of
Mm.
going through all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like another thing in pertaining to mindfulness, I think it's really hard not to get swept up into the news right now and just have the news on all the time and constantly reading stuff and engaging on social media all the time. And I think it's going to be different for everyone, but the amount that's helpful versus like crossing that line of it starting to provoke a little bit more anxiety or stress than it is being helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Having control over that in the sense of being mindful of taking in the information that is going to help you stay informed, and yet starting to notice when you feel like you're getting an overload of information, or all of a sudden it's all you're thinking about and you're projecting into the future. Like that's when
Right.
you know that you want to kind of shift maybe the direction of what you're doing, or shift the activity.
Yeah.
And that's also within your control as well. So
Yeah.
being able to kind of tune into the purpose of what you're doing and finding the controllables, I think is going to be hugely helpful
Yeah.
throughout this process, and just in general as well.
Yeah. So is that kind of like the like I get to statements versus I have to or I can't, like statements, and kind of looking at things that way? And I guess kind of like an example is like I can't go run my favorite trail because they close the parking lot, and I can't go to this restaurant anymore because they closed, and I can't do the weights because the gym's closed. Like looking at it that way, as opposed to saying I get to go run my local trails, and I get to work out at home with my family and show my kids like how to be strong, and I get to cook meals with my family. Like, is it kind of like that? Or
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like the can and the can't is going to be a huge distinguishing point between controllables and uncontrollables. And when you do focus on the can, you can also kind of like come back to like the values that you're working on as well. Like I can reflect on how this is like valuable, or how I find value in this, how I want to portray my values through this, of like what I can do.
right.
Yes, so a lot of like that can, can't is going to be like a fine line.
Yeah.
And so with like another kind of similarity between that is like the do's and the don'ts. So like getting stuck on the don'ts of like, well, I don't want to lose my strength. I don't want to lose access to this or to that. And like, okay, well, what do you want to do with what you have, kind of thing. So realizing how much of like the don'ts are there, and figuring out, okay, well, what do I want to do? And like, what can I do versus the don'ts and the can'ts? I think that's going to be, there's like a lot of awareness that's going to come around that, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And just with speaking with some of my athletes recently, is like a lot of the shift has gone to a bit more home body weight strength training stuff. And based on kind of the feedback and stuff I've been hearing from my athletes, that's definitely an area where, even though we were kind of maybe supposed to be doing a bit more of that during the off season and winter months, we didn't. And so now we're kind of forced to, in a sense, or maybe I should say we get to do that now instead of forced
There you go.
to. And so I think that's a really key component too of this, is like, we are able now to do maybe some things that we didn't really emphasize as much, or maybe as much as we should have over our off season. And now we are getting that opportunity to really hone in on these little kind of maybe like micro skills, if you will, or strengths, which I think is, I think hopefully we're all going to come out of this a lot stronger is my goal.
Yeah, for sure. And like, there's a lot of ways of looking at that as like, I mean, like the growth opportunity that can come from being through challenging times. And then also, funny enough, saying like forced to get into these workouts that aren't necessarily desirable, like that's totally fine. There are parts of training that you just do not feel motivated to do, and like that's okay. And like coming back against that why and being okay, well, like this is like the committed factor that I'm going to do putting into it. And I think something just kind of, as we're shifting into these different training regimens or working with what we have, like getting creative with what you get to do also is going to be really helpful. And I know this is also kind of a buzzword right now, but at the end of every workout, expressing some gratitude on like the post-workout, whether it went exactly how you thought it would, whether it went completely in a sideways direction, it was really hard, whatever your experience was with that workout, jot down 1 to 3 things you are grateful for post-workout. It has so much evidence behind it of being connected to and enhancing just your enjoyment, well-being, and connectedness to the people you're with, the connectedness to the workout. And that can be something that's done like post-workout or done in the morning as well, but finding a couple times or just one time throughout the day, like wherever you want to start, of just reflecting on what you're grateful for is, I think, going to be also pretty helpful, just reconnecting to that joy factor that feels like sometimes is lost at the moment. That can be so helpful, and just kind of going through the day-to-day right now.
Yeah, that could be a really good tool for like trainers and coaches to utilize in today's kind of Zoom cycle classes and Zoom yoga, and have everybody. I know yoga, I mean, definitely focuses a lot of that. You mean, usually you set an intention sometimes in the beginning of the practice, but bringing that to like a spin class or a home body weight workout with like your team or something like that via Zoom, and incorporating like that. I think during this time I could see that being really beneficial for a lot of people, just like refocusing. Now we get to, with Zoom, we have that a little bit more of a social interaction virtually, but also kind of expanding on that and focusing on those things that you are appreciative of post, I think will be really a great tool for a lot of people. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like being able to share that with other people. Also, I think we should transition from social distancing to physical distancing. And like those social connections. Sharing your gratitude with other people, or like hopping on a Zoom to do like with your friends to do, whether that's like a cycling class or the yoga classes, or I think there's some apps right now, I'd have to look what they are, but you can FaceTime while you're going on a run or working out with someone. You'll go certain like paces or paths together, which I think is like such a fun, creative way to somewhat maintain this like social connection that is going to be so helpful. And just being able to like talk it out with people that you trust, and giving a name to what you're feeling with others is going to be really helpful, and just kind of let it move through your body rather than it feeling so stuck all the time. Social connection should be a pretty big one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then let's see, we talked about Headspace, we talked about some value statements or things we value and our whys, mindfulness. And then let's see, you had mentioned there was a book suggestion, I think. That.
Yeah, so I have a couple book suggestions. My two favorites that have really just kind of altered my thinking in a sense, I think in a way that has been super beneficial to me. And granted, there's a little bit of like salt to be taken with it right now because of the times that we're in, but Thrive by Ariana Huffington.
Okay.
And then Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by, I think, Lori Gottlieb, I think
Okay.
is how you say her name.
Yeah.
Those two just provide, well, Thrive in particular, I think provides so much insight into the world that we are and were just like very caught up in. And it was so much on putting an emphasis on being overworked, and so much of like kind of was like I was talking about before, the doing and the doing instead of focusing on the being.
Mm-hmm.
She just provides so much insight into that and gives these like great explanations. It's a pretty easy read and just brings so much awareness to the way that we were living and how disconnected so many of us really were with our true values and what actually fills our cups. Like I think there's a lot going on that we put our focuses on that is more draining than it is fulfilling.
Right.
So she talks about that a lot. And then Lori Gottlieb's book of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. She is, I think it's mostly true stories that she's kind of had to adjust a little bit just based on confidentiality. But that book is more of her going, she's a therapist and she goes to see her own therapist, and so it's like her journey through that. And it's funny and it's a nice break from everything. It's like light humor, and there are parts that are also so just like heartwarming, and you feel so much for the people in the book. That also is just like a fun one to kind of read and go through right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, reading, I think a lot more of us have time to read some books right now too, for the most part. And so, yeah, I think grabbing a good book and reading into something like that too can help, with a lot of the stuff that we're going through right now, with this emotional roller coaster. And I think a lot of us are just too, maybe think we're handling it really well, or maybe not that stressed. And then one little thing might kind of like break the camel's back. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, I guess like there is a lot going on. Like I am maybe not managing this as best as I can. And I think, touching back to, I think it was like your first example with like the breathing and activating that parasympathetic nervous system, I think is so important, because training increases our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, especially if we're doing high intensity stuff, which training is a piece for a lot of people to kind of relieve stress in a sense. But it is actually elevating our stress hormones as well. And so making sure that if we're still doing this activation of the parasympathetic, and breath work is a really great tool to do that as well. So I love that. Any other tips or thoughts or suggestions for the audience?
I think one more thing that I just want to like emphasize, and it's kind of knitted into a lot of the stuff we talked about, but keeping in mind just like the self-care that you're doing right now and actually getting that quality recovery. So really reflecting on the times where you have felt like you really feel like you've emotionally, physically, mentally recovered, and like spiritually recovered as well. And reflecting on those times, figuring out what was really driving that, and being able, or trying to build that into your day from time to time. It's going to be pretty also big, or just like a useful tool as you go through this. And I mean, there's a ton of stuff on, like, I feel like we always read about like self-care and doing this and doing that, and figuring out what works for you, playing with it. I mean, so like we have the time to be able to kind of explore what that really means to us, and like reflecting on, like coming back to that reflection piece too, of like, okay, like how intentional was I in my recovery process? Like, did that actually help me feel recovered? Do I feel more drained now? Like, how can I work to be like, how can I show up every day in the way that I want to right now? And of course, there's like this emotional roller coaster, and it's really challenging. So just being okay with feeling afraid sometimes, or being okay with feeling stressed out and sad, and like that is totally okay, and it's just like the part of the process that we're in. And then that one other reading tool that I copied and pasted in the link that we can put in the notes here. It's
Yeah.
this incredible article. I think it was written on the Harvard Business Review, just about naming the emotion that we're feeling right now. And they talked about it being a lot around grief at the moment.
Yeah.
So giving that a read, that gave me a ton of comfort. I've sent it out to a lot of other people as well. And we're just like,
Awesome.
oh, like, yeah, like that's it. It just gives you a little bit of space from that feeling like it's in overdrive right now.
Yeah.
Just kind of let it like pass through the body at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think those are just kind of like the last couple of things I wanted to touch on.
Definitely. Yeah. And we'll include, you guys, all these books, Headspace, the journal article, all that stuff in the notes for you guys to check out if you want to read a little bit further into that. And then also Jen does work with clients virtually right now, which is great. So if you guys want to link up with her, we'll include her information below as well. Do you have any other notes or where people can find you, or do you want me to just leave it in the notes?
Yeah, you can just leave it in the notes, but you can find me on my website. It's Jen Simmons, MPC, standing for Mental Performance Consultant.com. You can send me an email at either it's jenhaleysimmons@gmail.com, or that's kind of a long one. You can also send it to jen@evolvetherapy.org. Yeah, I'm happy to chat, and just let me know. Those are usually the two best ways to reach me. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. This has been so fantastic. I even got some benefits from it too. I feel like I got like a Jen session in. So I highly encourage you guys to check out Jen and book a session with you. I think you said you do any length of sessions, right? Short, longer, whatever people need. So
yeah, for sure. Totally flexible with the timing of what you're looking for, what you want to work on, what your times are. Yeah.
Awesome. That's so great. Well, you guys check Jen out, and if you guys have any questions, put them in the notes below, and maybe we can follow up with Jen and get some answers there, and answer some of your guys' questions in the future. All right. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.